fun things to do today?
Gee, there's a gazillion fun things we could do. Oh, that sounds like a silly switch. Let's go see what it has.
Hello. Quickly, I'll be arguing for the affirmative proposition that. I've got a delay in my mic. Hang on one second. Here, take this out. Here, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my opponent to kind of make an opening speech really quick.
Yeah, you can get your mic set up, and I see you have a little one there. I don't know what to say. I don't know how anybody can think Israel is the victim. I mean, I think they're the victim of religious fanaticism, and I think they're the victim of a lot of foreign influence and money. But I don't see how you can be racially colonizing an area and act like you really want peace. I mean, the death tolls in a 9-to-1 ratio of Palestinians, and they have all their infrastructure blown up every few years. So whenever you're ready, you can explain it to me, because I'm not sure how anybody takes that side. I mean, the UN just voted. I mean, they've had over 44 resolutions against Israel, only one on Palestine. The whole world recognizes that there's a military occupation and apartheid. I mean, they have racial segregation in the West Bank. And most people in the current year decided that that level of racism and violence is a bad thing.
I'm getting double feedback. I'm hearing a recording, and then I'm hearing myself twice, as well as you. So it's a little hard to follow your argument. The thing about the Israeli conflict here, of course, I just gave my daughter my notes, is, sorry. Let me turn down my audio. Yes. Okay, there, that's better. Is that the primary arguments against Israel have come primarily from Islamic propaganda, and people say that. But the statistics following Israel, as far as national law and their behavior morally and in relationship to war crimes or humanitarian, Israel has the lowest. Sorry, I can't even think straight right now. That's infuriating. Let me get to my notes to help me out here. Okay, so I'll start from the beginning. Israel is the rightful inheritor of that land. As far as history goes, Israel has been Israel almost to 2700 BC. Now, since that time, the land of Israel has been chopped up and divvied out and claimed and reclaimed and lost hundreds and hundreds of times. Currently, now, several nations still exist within the Israel territory. Jordan, Palestine, I think even Libya has a small amount of it. The Israel nation itself, that's Jerusalem and the surrounding areas. But as far as the rightful owners of the area that's Israel, Israel has always been Israel, as far back as written history can lend us. A lot of the conflict that goes between Israel and even Palestine, a lot of people don't really, I mean, there's a majority of people that don't understand it. Israel is primarily Jewish and Palestine is primarily Muslim. It is dyed in the wool that Muslims really do not like Israel. I mean, it's within the Quran that they should, during a certain time, I'm not sure the exact time, but they should kill Jews. Here I have the Shura 2, the Shura al-Asya, says, therefore, we said that the children of Israel live in the land, so that when the appointed time of the hereafter will come, we shall bring you and join you together. That's in the Quran. The Quran talks about Israel. And then, of course, in the Bible, the Torah specifically, they talk about the nature of Israel and the land of Israel and the Canaan Wars and those things. So both the Bible and the Quran actually recognize Israel as a body of people. But neither the Bible nor the Quran recognize the Palestinians as a body. And of course, the book of the hadiths in the Quran were written somewhere between 600 and 800 or something like that. I don't know the specific dates. So all the way up until you get into the modern ADs, do you actually have a country that's Palestine? So Palestine is really an injecting neighbor, not a natural-born citizenry. And then, of course, I'm just going to quote the Quran specifically, where it talks about the death to the Jews, that they should be hiding under the stones, and the stones would cry out, "There's a Jew behind me, kill him." Or there's a tree, the Jew is hiding behind the tree, and apparently there's a specific tree that they can hide behind that wouldn't give them up, or something like that. I won't really bother with that point. But the UN has shown itself to largely be Islamic sympathizers. I mean, if you look at just the recent Occupy Palestine, the resolution that's been pushed forward, all the countries that voted for it were primarily Islamic. All the countries that voted against it were primarily Christian or various sort of that. And then, of course, there's a number of countries that did absolutely nothing. They didn't vote for it either, nor. So the overbearing populace of the Muslim countries hate Israel. From existentially, they hate Israel. And they primarily believe this out of several reasons. But one is they believe that Jerusalem belongs to them because Muhammad marked it as a holy land. They want Jerusalem. They want Jerusalem to keep it. And of course, the Jews are there. Let's see here. As far as the Palestinian conflict, as long as it's been on since the early, I think, 1800s, of course, here's Dr. Alan Dwarshitz, the professor of law at Harvard, points out that before June of 1967, the West Bank, including much of Jerusalem, was controlled by Jordan. During that time, a time when Israel did not have a single settlement, there was numerous Palestinian terror attacks against the nation state of the Jewish people. Palestinians committed terrorist attacks against Israel where there were no settlements, and they committed terrorist attacks against Israel when there were settlements. So they think that the conflict has something to do with territories when it really has something to do with the very nature of their beliefs about each other. I'll stop there and go ahead and turn it over to
Okay. Can you hear me? All right, cool. Just about everything you said is false. Yes, there was a kingdom of Judea and Hebron, which is mentioned in the Bible and the Quran. It was never what you consider greater Israel, much less parts of Libya and Egypt and Jordan and all the Levant territory that Israel likes to claim. Israel was just the rename of the Israelites in the Bible, where Jacob changed his name. The story of Jacob and Esau is pretty ridiculous because this is religious history, not real history. In religious history, you also have Samson with his magic hair that killed 1,000 Philistines. Philistines are the Palestinians that you say are not mentioned in the Bible, but they are. The Hebrews went into that area, and there were people already living there. That's why Baal, B-A-A-L-L, gets in a war with God. This stuff is ridiculous. But even David took his kingdom from Saul. They lost it. It's been Muslim uncontested for 1,180 years. It was Palestine when Alexander the Great invaded in 333 BC. He went into Tyre. Those were Palestinians. There are any Jews. There are about 3% to 4% population of Jews have always lived there. But the majority of people have been Canaanites, Philistines, Assyrians, etc. Those are the native people. Now, that doesn't matter to me because you don't racially inherit land. And you don't have an ethnic group that has a tie to land automatically because their great-great-great-great-great-great-granddad are pissed on it. I mean, I could say that Asia belongs to me because 20,000 years ago, my ancestors, I'm Native American, crossed the Bering Strait from Asia into the U.S. So I can't just go to Asia, kick someone out of their house and say, hey, long time ago, my people were here first. That's a ridiculous argument. They're not Israel was created in 1948 by the United Nations. And before that, you know, the Palestinians that lived there under the Ottoman Empire, under the Roman Empire, under the British Empire as Palestinians, people with private property living with Jews, by the way. In the 48, you had all these European migrants because of World War II. We understand the reasons, but they went into Israel. And the Stern Gang and Irgun terrorists started a war. Now, prior to the 1967 war, you had another war in 1956. which was started by a false flag in Egypt. You had the Operation Susanna and the Lavon affair. Pinhas Lavon, the defense minister of Israel, was thrown in jail for this. They went around bombing Western targets and tried to blame it on Egyptians, but one of the Israelis' bombs went off prematurely in his coat and went through his house. They figured out what it was. But the British didn't care. The British and the French and the Israelis pounded on Egypt and on Palestine because the British wanted to maintain control of the Suez Canal. That's flat out the real reason for the 56 war. In light of that, Eisenhower stepped in 57, and they put peacekeepers there for 10 years. That was 1967. 5 days after they were removed, Israel preemptively strikes Egypt while Egypt is already involved with the conflict in Yemen fighting the Saudis, and take out their air force. And then they started annexing territory. The moment the UN peacekeepers were removed from Palestine, Israel entered the area and took control. They started building settlements until 2005. They got removed from Gaza. They still have settlements in the West Bank. And then you said, oh, it's primary Islamic nations that voted on the UN resolution. That's just bullshit. France voted on the UN resolution in favor of Palestine. So did Britain. So did Germany. So did China. So did Russia. Everybody on the entire Security Council voted to end settlements, with the exception of the United States, who abstained. So they're all yes votes, all from Christian countries, if you want to label countries as religions. It seems like you're having a problem over there with your thing, but did you hear what I said about the UN resolution? Shake your head. I'll pass it over to you. The entire Security Council voted yes, except for the United States. And that's because of the influence of the lobby on the United States. But I don't think Britain and France and Russia and China, these are like Muslim sympathizers. They just see racial colonization and home demolition as an impossible thing to defend.
What's happening is that when you're speaking, it's recording 20 seconds of what you're saying, and then it's repeating it over and over and over. So I really am a real hard time understanding anything you said, but I caught a bit of it. I actually just looked at the occupied Palestine today, and no, not primarily all countries voted for it. There were several countries that voted for it, and there were a lot of countries that didn't simply vote at all. But there were actually many countries that voted against it, such as France, and one very specific that stood out that I remember. As far as the history, rightful land ownership is a big part of territories when it comes to conflicts and war. If you own a place and someone comes and impedes on that place, you have the right to defend that place. People are trying to demonize Israel as the aggressor, but it's not aggressive to defend yourself, especially if you take back territory that you once owned. Now, when it comes to the West Bank is owned by Jordan now, but it wasn't always owned by Jordan. And when Israel occupied that land, it was under duress. They took over that area to defend against rocket attacks. Now that, under international law, gives them the legal right to occupy that area indefinitely until a peaceable agreement is made. And I went and quoted that law just a little bit so we know that that technically is the case. And the international law of military occupation following aggressive attacks of another country state until a meaningful peaceable state is achieved and all terrorism against it ceases. So by international law, everything doing in those is legal. Now, it's, I really wish I'd heard everything else you said. Israel gives up almost in every scenario parts of its lands to create peace treaties. And then once these occur, Palestine or Jordan or any of the other following countries retaliate with rocket attacks or missile attacks. Hence why the sophisticated Iron Dome was created in order to defend against the rocket attacks consistently. Israel does, like I said, have the greatest human rights record in history compared to any other country. But when it comes to Palestine, Palestine has 26,795 terrorist attacks since 1940. Why? Who's the aggressor there? I mean, it's clearly if your beliefs as a Muslim dictates that you should hate or kill Jews, and then you surround a country that you believe belongs to you, naturally you're going to try to take that over. I mean, it's if I believed that, let's say, the Statue of Liberty belonged to the United States and another country, let's say Lithuania, decided to claim it for its own, there is going to be conflict. So between the two states, clearly the Muslim nation believes that the whole city of Jerusalem belongs to them by Bible. Now, of course, you tried to trash, and I won't get terribly into that. The Bible is a historical document, that actually happens to be an area of my concern. The Bible is the premier document when it comes to ancient history. Much of archaeology and much of history itself has been validated through the biblical scripture. Now, it doesn't matter whether Samson beat a bunch of people with a donkey bone, 10,000, irrelevant. I can think of any amount of Egyptology or Slavic religions, how they have mythical portions to them, contain valid historical propositions in them. Just because there are miracles in the Bible doesn't mean that it doesn't maintain itself as a historically reliable document. It's not about whether the Bible is true, it is about whether it can be viewed as a historically reliable document, which it is, and has been validated. Almost every New Testament and Old Testament scholar, and even historians and archaeologists that I have ever met, respect the Bible as an authentic historical document. That is almost unanimously non-contested. And simply because you shake your head and you don't believe it doesn't mean that it's not. Most of the Bible, I would say, let's just say 30% of it is completely unfalsifiable, things you can't possibly know. But when it comes to the framework of the Bible, there's lots that you can validate or invalidate through historical methodology, which has been the discovery of the pools of Bethesda. I mean, the chariots of Egypt and Rome in the Red Sea. Let's see here, the sigil of David, King David, who supposedly didn't exist, has recently been found. Sodom apparently has been found. I won't beat that point to death, but whether or not, the fact that it's mentioned at all still adds to the credence that Israel has lived there almost forever, as far as modern man is concerned. Now, why is it that in 2005, Israel abandoned the Gaza Strip and gave it to Palestine, and yet during that time, they still retaliated with rocket attacks? Can you explain that?
Yep. Is mine on? Okay. So the reason I mentioned the story of Samson was because you said the Palestinians are not referred to in the Bible, and I said the Philistines are the Palestinians. Miracle stories are not. The Philistines are all over the Bible. That's who was there when the Hebrews entered that land from Egypt, which you just referred to through your going through the Red Sea mythology. In the book of Hebrews, in the Bible, they say they went around the Red Sea, not through it, which makes a lot more sense than the Genesis story. In the Bible, in 2 Samuel, when they talk about David's ascension to the throne, it's over Hebron. That is it. That's where Judea is. It's not all of Israel today, and it's certainly not Greater Israel, which includes part of Africa and then Jordan, Syria, etc. That's the historical part in your own